Attention, all hands. This is Commander Williams. Prepare for touchdown. Let's finally get this baby on the red planet and see what all the fuss is about.
Commander Williams, I want to express my...
Save it, Professor Phillips. You can express all the gratitude you have in front of the cameras when we get back. Focus on your mission, and make this trip worth all the money and time that we've invested in it.
Always to the point, Maya. Let the man thank you for God's sake.
This is not a commercial airline, Sarah. You do not have to applaud when I make a successful landing. Hearing those words come out of my lips was absolutely surreal. After everything that we've been through, collectively as a species, I didn't expect that we'd actually get here. On the cusp of one of mankind's greatest missions that brought the slightest glimmer of hope in our dire existence, stood little old me, and only 5 others. The first ones to ever step on another planet, not counting the moon. My excitement was burning a hole in my stomach, though I would never show anyone the childish giddiness I felt about being on this mission. Not to be morbid, but I could already see my obituary. Maya Williams, commander of the Ares, head of the first manned mission to Mars, dies at age 97. She was a loving friend, blah blah, all of that other stuff.
Stop being so nonchalant about it.
I hated that Ray knew exactly what I was thinking, and that he always made it clear that he did. That's what made him the perfect co-pilot, I guess. I wish I knew if he was still alive. A matter of moments later, we were successfully grounded on Mars. Whiffs of stress sweat came through my suit, and I could tell Ray could smell it too, because he just kept side-eyeing me. He didn't exactly smell of roses either.
Still don't want that applause?
I'd prefer some champagne.
Best I can offer is flavored water. I think we only have lemon left.
We can all hear you, Commander.
Sarah, our lovely medical doctor with the bedside manner of a stinging wasp. Just the way I like my friends, dealing a little bit of venom every time they talk to you. Perfect. Crack your knuckles and let's get ready for all that red dust that's gonna end up in our asses.
You're a delight, Maya. Thank you for not killing us.
I said no expressions of gratitude. Besides, there's still time, Sarah. We've only just arrived. 2 minutes in, and we were all as busy as bees around the Ares. Sarah was doing the rounds and checking all of our most vital stats, while Chris was making sure that the engines were cooling off nicely. What our 2 professors, the mission specialists on terraforming, were doing, I had but the slightest idea. However, they made sure that we knew they weren't just lounging around. Every once in a while, Professor Phillips would pop on comms asking this and that, but I let Ray handle him once we touched down on the planet. Aside from babying Professor Phillips, Ray had the task of opening up a comms channel to Earth, so that I could record and send formal messages, then let the rest say hi to their loved ones back on the pale blue dot. At this point, I was scanning the neighboring area of the landing site, and checking if our readings from Earth were correct, and detailed enough before I could send a small team out for the first ever Mars walk. I could tell that Professor Phillips wanted to be the first one out of the hatch. However, as protocol would state, the first foot to touch the surface would have to be either me or Ray. Shit, I really wanted it to be me. How sentiments change once you've been through hell. Now, I wish that neither of us had stepped out of the Ares onto Mars. I should have realized something was wrong from the moment I found out that no robot, and no other of our instruments on the planet was sending any of its feedback to the Ares. Communication failure, my ass! In the beginning, however, there were no indications that something was wrong. In fact, all of us were optimistic and relaxed about the Mars walk, to a stupidly high degree. Did we rely on information that we had received from our robots about the surface of the planet beforehand too much? In retrospective, that answer was yes. And to the fact, the moment that I discovered a hidden tunnel just a few miles starboard of the Ares, I had decided that it would be a perfect location to begin our mission. Professor Sheridan was the only one to protest, heading straight to unexplored, underground locations of the planet, fearing possible structural instabilities of the tunnel. We quickly outvoted her, though, with Phillips happy to see the best possible site where he thought life could begin on Mars. Team A ready?
As ready as we'll ever be, Commander. Pop the hatch, Maya. Let's get this show on the road.
Professor Phillips and Ray were way too excited to begin exploring, unlike Sheridan, who showed a lot of trepidation and was the only one to take care and follow protocol to the ladder. Shame she was among the first ones to go. I blame myself for not taking her reservations into consideration, even if the reason for her demise would, ultimately, not be the structural instability of a bunch of dirt and rock.
One small step. God, Ray. Can't you say one original thing in your life? Our bickering will be original when they listen to this recording back on Earth, or any of our recordings. Mouth closed and eyes open. Yes, sir.
Ray was giggling over comms. Sarah rolled her eyes at me because she had insisted that I be the first one to go on the surface with the team. I patted her on the back like I didn't care, but there was too much to be done on board that I couldn't leave Ray in charge of. Chris had informed me that our engines were behaving a little erratic, like they weren't shutting down completely. He needed my help, since I was the only one with an engineering degree, and Ray was first and foremost a soldier. I left Sarah in charge of overseeing our team in the tunnel, while Chris and I finagled the engines into submission.
This isn't the best solution, Maya. We might be able to take off, but I don't know how they'll handle the rest.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Besides, a little rest might do the trick. Just make sure we don't burn through any more fuel. Suddenly, Sarah's voice was heard through comms.
Maya, get your ass back here! Trouble in the tunnels!
Once I heard Sarah panicking, I knew that the trouble she was talking about wasn't just a small hitch. I rushed to the main deck of the Ares, only to find Sarah talking Ray down and convincing him to come back on board.
Ray, there's nothing you can do. Leave them there and get back here immediately.
Sarah saw me come in, turned off the comms, and explained what happened.
There was some kind of accident, and both the professors are dead. Ray isn't making much sense about how it all went down, but he wants to make sure that he's not leaving them alive and hurt down there.
I agree that he should make sure. What the hell, Sarah?
His oxygen is at 2%, barely enough to come back from the entrance. We'll lose him too.
Fuck! I switched the comms back on, only to hear Ray praying and crying from his side. Ray, buddy, you've gotta come back to the Ares. We could barely see him through the starboard windows, standing right at the entrance of the tunnel.
Maya, it was horrible. I couldn't. I don't have any weapons.
Weapons? Both I and Sarah yelped informally.
To protect them.
Listen, Ray, come back on board, and you'll explain what happened. Without any oxygen, you won't be able to help them anyway.
Maya.
His voice was cracking. Get back here now! That's an order! Sarah quickly got the medbay ready and came back to the main hatch in time to help me get Ray safely back inside. He was delirious.
It came out of nowhere. I told him. I told Phillips that the walls looked weird. Like they were like...
Calm down, buddy. Sarah, can't you give him something?
I have to see the extent of his injuries first.
That was really professional of her, and it would have been alright if Ray wasn't struggling with us like an ox in heat. Even Chris arrived in the medbay to hold him down.
Jeez, man. Easy on the chocolate pudding cake.
Stop it, both of you, and help me get his helmet off before he suffocates.
Sarah was trying her best, but it was obvious that Ray went through some incredible trauma. I'd never seen him like this, and this wasn't the first time he was my co-pilot. We'd been on moon missions together more times than I can count. His cries were what really got me, though. Not just the crazy story that he was bumbling.
I'm telling you, Maya. It was the walls. It came out of them. But it was also a part of them. The walls of the tunnel. I told Phillips, but he wouldn't listen.
What are you saying, Ray? Did you see living things down there?
That's impossible!
Sarah burst out. Hush, Sarah! Let him get it off his chest, I told her. Chris was holding down Ray, and was as silent as a mouse. His confusion almost matched Ray's.
The walls, Maya. The walls were made out of flesh!
Ray finally said, and lost consciousness. Chris eventually managed to get Ray's recording device, but it was badly damaged, which meant we only had his word for what happened down there. Meanwhile, Sarah was moving around Ray with the speed of light, scanning and checking for injuries visually. However, she couldn't find anything wrong with him physically.
Shock,
she said. I could have told you as much, Sarah. What the hell happened down there? Walls made of flesh?
Shock.
Thanks. That's what you went to medical school for, eh?
Maybe there is some truth to what he was saying.
Sarah and I looked at Chris in utter disbelief. We were on Mars, a planet that we had known for centuries to be dead and done. Truth to what Ray was saying? Maybe you should check if this one hit his head too. Sarah wasn't interested in my shenanigans. Ray would have been. He loved poking fun at Chris and his wild theories. Professor Phillips hated listening to Chris, and every time they would get into an argument on extraterrestrial life, I could see the academic's blood starting to boil. I loved it. Not to speak ill of the dead, but that guy sure could make any subject matter a point of contention. Well, since our soldier boy is out cold, it seems I'm the only one here that can go out and see what actually happened in the tunnels.
Are you mad? If the tunnels didn't fall apart on them, the chances are that there was either a toxin that slipped into their suits or something else that killed the two and made Ray into a bumbling mess of a man.
So what do you suggest we do? Go back?
Yes, Maya, that's what I'm suggesting.
We can't leave them there.
Chris finally spoke.
And we have to see what happened. They'll be expecting a full report back home so that they know how to prep for the other missions.
Hear that? That's the voice of reason.
As opposed to?
The voice of fear, Sarah.
Are you telling me you're not afraid?
I'm telling you that I'm the commander of this mission. I don't have the privilege to be afraid. I'm going down there.
Maya, I think I should go.
No, Chris. It's my duty to see what happened and to bring back the bodies of our dead. If they are even dead. Besides, I'll be the one writing the report. I should see the situation with my own eyes. Of course I was afraid. Whatever was down there broke the mind of the strongest person I had ever known. But I had to see for myself. It wasn't just the report. I had to know. I tried to cut down the procedure, to leave the Ares as much as I safely could, so that I was ready and packed inside my suit in a matter of hours. Just as I was standing at the hatch and preparing for my coveted Mars walk, Chris joined me there, holding something in his hands.
It's not exactly a weapon, but it might just do the trick if anything shows up.
He handed me a long metal pipe that he had clearly yanked out of something in engineering. Should I be worried about where this came from?
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
He smiled at me. And you really think I need this?
Better safe than sorry, right?
I turned around and unlocked the hatch, leaving the safety of the Ares. Sarah and Chris were under command to light up the Ares and leave if I didn't come back in around 12 hours, which was approximately the time I had with my oxygen tanks. She hated the idea of Chris piloting the ship almost as much as she hated me going through the tunnel. But we all have to work with the cards we've been dealt. Even though I couldn't hear it, I felt the crunch of the Martian soil under my feet when I stepped out of the ship. It would have felt amazing had the circumstances been different. Comms check. Ares, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Maya.
Thanks, Chris. Where's Sarah?
Ray woke up. She's with him.
Is he saying anything new?
Sarah hasn't informed me of anything. Do you want me to check?
Not right now. I'm almost at the entrance.
Remember to switch on the recorder once you're in.
Here is a gaping hole in the ground. The open looks bigger. Where I'm stand. Pitch black.
Maya, I'm losing you. You're on your own from now. Godspeed.
That was the last time I heard a human voice. I would never have imagined it to be Chris at the end, nor did I want it to be him. I could already tell that the trek inside the tunnel would be a long one. Ray had been inside for over 8 hours, so I knew that I had to at least get to the place approximately 4 to 5 hours from here. He must have been hyperventilating to drain his oxygen so fast upon return. In any case, I'll soon find out what scared him so much that he could barely hold his senses together. to even run back to the Ares and establish communication. At first, everything looked just as I expected it to look. A dark, long tunnel heading deep inside the belly of the planet. It had a subtle decline, but it still felt a bit difficult walking downwards. The ground was rocky and uneven, and my light was just dim enough to not show every single thing I could potentially hit into. I stubbed my toes way too many times, and Mars made sure I felt every little rock through my heavy boots. The first 2 hours or so were pretty uneventful, and mostly included me cursing at the rocky terrain. However, as I was getting lower and lower into the tunnel, I began noticing changes in my surroundings. Gradual changes. The ground had become soft here and there. Then, there were things that almost looked like vines. No, they were veins, going through both the ground and the walls. I had to get very close to the walls to be able to see them. I even thought that it was the trick of the light, my nerves even, that were messing with my perception. As I was getting close to hour 3 of my descent, deeper into the bowels of Mars, I began noticing that the changes had almost completely taken over the place. Everything felt soft and mushy under my boots. I couldn't feel the crunch of the soil anymore, nor did I stub my toes on any rocks. I kept tripping over weird veins that were swirling around the sides of the tunnel, until I face-planted right on the ground and came really close to seeing what it was made out of. The ground looked organic. Organic. Like flesh. What the fuck? Was there actually some truth to what Ray was on about back at the medbay? When I was getting up from the ground, I noticed that my gloves were covered in some kind of slime, but I couldn't feel its consistency or see its true color under my light. I took out a small vial from my kit and collected some of it, though I wasn't sure if it was something that I should be bringing back to the Ares. Who knows what it was? Getting up from the ground was tricky. First, it felt almost as if I was trying to get up from a waterbed, and on top of that, it was all covered in that slime that made me slip and fall way too many times. When I finally got up and looked ahead of me, I could have swore that I saw something move on the side walls of the tunnel. Or was it the walls that were moving? Damn flashlight. It was worth close to nothing in the pitch-black tunnels of Mars. Something strange came over me, and I finally felt fear creeping in. I grabbed the pipe that Chris gave me in my other hand and held onto it tightly, ready to strike if the chance presented itself to me. Something was still moving in the distance of the tunnel. I could only see its shadow that was cast on the walls ahead of me. I felt very small compared to it, even though the shadow didn't show a grand thing that was moving. Ray's words kept playing in my head, over and over again, as I came close to the point where I first saw something move. There was nothing there now, but I could almost feel a presence deeper inside the tunnel. My throat was dry, and I could feel my heart racing faster and faster. At this rate, I'll be burning through my oxygen faster than Ray did with his. Because I was focusing on the tunnel ahead, I stopped looking at the ground, and eventually tripped again, falling on the soft surface. I noticed the slime again, but this time I also realized where it came from. Just next to the pool of ooze I had fallen into, I saw a pile of fabric, and an oxygen tank perched upon it. Not possible, I thought, so I crawled closer to the pile and saw a pair of boots, still strapped onto the fabric. I looked down into the slime, and couldn't hold my vomit as it came out of my mouth and onto my visor. I was literally crawling through the liquefied remains of either Phillips or Sheridan. No force on Mars or Earth could make me inspect the suit to figure out which one it was. Suddenly, the movement in the tunnel became even more dynamic. With my visor covered in puke, I could see even less than I did before, so I had to find my pipe by touch alone. When it was finally in my hand, I raised my flashlight to shine it into the tunnel again. Just as fast as I had raised my flashlight, something knocked me off my feet and back into the ooze again. The shape of it was amorphous and inhuman. The instant it came at me again, I smacked it with the pipe, jumped up, and ran away as fast as I possibly could. However, it took me a moment to realize that I was running in the wrong direction and deeper inside the tunnel. At what happened to be hour 4 of my descent, I finally arrived at a place that no human eyes had ever seen before. Not even Ray, I would presume, since what I saw at that moment was something that he surely would have rambled about first when he got back to the Ares. As I was getting closer to that point, I thought I felt the ground move slightly, but I was running so fast that I couldn't be sure. Once I had completely stopped, however, I was certain. It was moving. Not just the ground, but everything. I shined my flashlight into a massive opening at the very end of the tunnel and saw a beast of magnanimous proportion. While I wasn't the mission's expert on such matters, I would have called it a primordial creature, sleeping within its planet-sized shell. It looked underdeveloped still. Was this some kind of space baby trapped by the gravity of our sun before it could hatch? What the fuck? It was as magnificent as it was terrifying. I sure am glad it was still curled around itself like a fetus. Hopefully, it would take billions more to hatch. Because if it does... Suddenly, I felt the presence of another creature near me. As it came closer, the massive fetus began uncurling slightly, like the two were connected. Was the thing that was after me even a creature? Or was it some kind of defense organism, protecting the beast? Fuck if I cared at that moment. Once I saw it come even closer, I raised the pipe, only to realize that it wasn't a pipe I was holding, but a broken femur bone. I dropped it to the ground out of sheer horror, and with no defenses of my own, the only thing I could do was to run as fast as I could and ram my body into the thing to knock it out. God, was I lucky that my plan worked. I rammed into the thing, and it splashed into a million little bits of goo, covering both me and a sizable amount of the tunnel. I cleared my visor and began running in the direction of the exit, realizing that I had been in the tunnel for much longer than Ray had been. I ran and I ran for hours, without the slightest notion where at all the stamina came from. Finally, as my oxygen levels were almost depleting, I reached the exit, and could see the daylight coming through the opening. I happily pounced towards it, thinking that I had been saved, lucky to be alive. However, just as I left the tunnel, I saw that the Ares had already taken up flight.
Ares! Ares, can you hear me? I'm alive!
The moment I said those words, the worst scenario imaginable occurred. There was a tiny puff of smoke that came out of the rear of the Ares, and in a matter of seconds, it was swirling erratically around the sky until it crashed somewhere in the distance of the planet. I was alive, but were they? Again, I felt a presence in the tunnel behind me. The ground shook a little. I didn't even turn to face it this time.